I'm Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. That is Nick Wright. It is Monday. We had a very productive Sunday in the NFL. Everyone have a good weekend?
Yes. How many interceptions did you throw this weekend?
It wasn't 5, I'll tell you that.
How many did you throw?
Throwing interceptions against my religion.
All right, so between us, we are 5 short of Nathan Peterman. So we already have.
Nathan Peterman had himself a very tough weekend, but the good news is nobody was talking about it, so
Correct.
It wasn't hyped or anything.
Here's to the Peterman.
Tons of Seinfeld jokes there. We're going to get to all that in a bit, but we're going to start with the much-hyped, much-rivaled NFC East showdown last night between the Eagles and the Cowboys, which turned into a Philadelphia rout. As the Eagles rolled to a 37-9 win, Carson Wentz threw for 2 touchdowns and 168 yards, while Dak Prescott had 3 picks and 145 yards. The Eagles improved to a league-best 9-1. Cowboys dropped to 5-5 after their second straight loss. Both quarterbacks talked about this after the game.
I think it just shows that we have a lot of belief in each other and we can get the job done, you know, whenever, wherever.
Is it as simple as just not having Zeke and Tyron?
What do you mean?
The offensive struggles. I mean, is that?
Nah, not at all. I mean, it's no excuses. We're not saying injuries or any of that's bothering us. I mean, as I said, we just got to execute plays better. We're not saying it's the reason we're not winning is because of those guys.
We can dive into all of it and what happened and why it happened, but Cece, I'll start with you, and let's start from the Cowboys angle. What went so wrong for Dallas last night?
Well, it's not as if things went wrong. I expected Philadelphia to beat them soundly. So it's not as if I didn't expect this type of performance from Dallas. What I was a little surprised at was Dallas ran the ball effective enough, but Dak's overall decision-making, because going into the game, Dak knows he's under a different type of pressure. Now, we know coming into the game, Philadelphia, their defensive line being one of the best in the NFL, if not the best. Jim Schwartz is a defensive coordinator. He had 7 players that had played 250 snaps. So we knew that they'd have some type of rotation. Coach Mangini sat here and said, I thought he thinks that Dallas should maybe at the beginning of the game go to a no-huddle offense to take advantage of them just having one unit. They didn't do that. This was a divisional game, a hard-hitting game. Dallas's defense played well enough to be able to keep the game within striking distance. Carson Wentz, I like the fact that he had patience, even though he didn't have a great outing.
Right.
What you want to see is young players find a way to win. Don't turn the football over, all right? Convert third downs. They had a hard time doing that. But methodically, you could see that Philadelphia, they're just a lot better team than the Dallas Cowboys at this point. Now, Dallas, their coaching staff, they did a good job as far as helping the offensive line, totally different than they did in the Atlanta game where they gave up the 8 sacks. But Dallas's defense played about as well as they could play for the first 2.5, 3 quarters of the game. And then Philadelphia, their overall, they have more playmakers. They have better players. They have a better offense and defensive line than the Cowboys do right now. So this was the result that I expected, so not surprised at all.
Here's what would be so frustrating if I were a Cowboys fan. Cece, you laid out what Dallas would have to do to have a chance to win this football game. And it is exactly what they did in the first half. And it was working. You talked about all week staying dedicated to the run. Your key was at least 32 carries.
Yeah, shorten the game.
Even if they weren't super effective with the running game. In the first half, 19 rushes. Only 69 yards on those rushes, but you know what it allowed? Their offense was on the field for 18.5 minutes. So the defense, when it was out there, was fresh, was not gassed. And guess what? In the first half, Philly was their worst offensive outing of the year. They didn't convert a single first down. Carson Wentz was dreadful in the first half. He was averaging 4.5 yards per pass. He was completing less than 40% of his passes. The Cowboys were doing exactly what they had to do to keep it close.
Except create turnovers.
They hadn't created turnovers, but they were still. They went into the half up 9-7. And if the offense just hadn't sputtered after the opening kickoff where Switzer takes it down, gives them great field position, like the Cowboys could have even had a larger lead. But they go to halftime saying, okay, this is exactly where we wanted to be. We knew we weren't going to be able to blow out Philly, but we wanted it to be a one-score game. It's a one-score game plus in our favor. Let's go out and try to do the same thing. And the problem was, as has been the theme for the Cowboys this season, The other team makes halftime adjustments. They do not, and the game changes dramatically in the third quarter. There's 32 teams in this league. Some of them are terrible. Some of them have Deshaun Kaiser at quarterback. Some of them are not even trying to win games this season. Not a single team in the league has been outscored by more points than the Cowboys in the third quarter. The Cowboys have been the worst third quarter team in the league, and this is now the third game that they had a halftime lead that they went on to lose. So they had a good game plan for the first half. Philly made some adjustments. Dallas couldn't. Dallas got punched in the mouth on the opening drive for Philly the second half, and they could not recover.
And that's something that we talk about a lot, is that this Dallas team isn't making in-game adjustments. They aren't doing what they need to do during the game. They end the game, win or lose, and then they start thinking about what they can or cannot do. Why is it so hard for Jason Garrett to make those in-game adjustments, CC?
Well, I think it's a hard conclusion to draw to, because 9-7, the reason why they're leading that game, in 9-7, yes, technically it is a lead, but I mean, it's only 2 points in the lead. So
right.
it wasn't as if Philadelphia was down 2 touchdowns or 10 points. Dallas did make adjustments, but what you saw in the second half, the wide receivers don't make plays. Dez Bryant, the top 3 receivers last night, Dez Bryant averaged 4.5 yards per target. Terrence Williams, 5 yards per target. Your boy Cole Beasley, seems like they found out about him.
Love that guy.
1.8 yards. Love him. You and his mama only, okay?
No.
1.8
I said
yards.
you love that guy. That's not my. I got guys. That's not my guy.
I was just looking at you talking to him.
Okay. Thanks for
1.8
clarifying.
yards. So they did make adjustments. So this is not about Dallas' staff. They made adjustments, but also in the adjustments, like Philadelphia, players made plays. Carson Wentz played better in the second half. Their offensive line played better in the second half.
Yeah.
Their defense played a lot better in the second half. So I wouldn't stay in just that lane. Dallas didn't make adjustments. Now, we saw in the Atlanta game, they didn't help out the tackle. They changed everything up. They really tried to help this offensive line, and at halftime, had them in position to try to win the game in the second half. But at some point, I can make adjustments, but if the guys don't make plays, that's what it comes down to. And that's probably the thing that probably has me the most disappointed in the Cowboys, not only this game, but this year or the last year and a half. The wide receivers, especially Dez Bryant, he's not an elite player. They don't make enough plays to build support Dak. Now, especially with Zeke being out, where you need wide receivers to make big plays down the field, they don't have that.
And your Dez Bryant point, I mean, you've been making this point all year, and it's, I mean, a totally fair one. It's not Cris picking on Dez. It's not even what we do sometimes, or at least what I do sometimes, which is hold great players to a much higher standard than we hold everyone else, maybe in an unfair standard. Dez Bryant is now 0 getting 100 yards in a game in his last season's worth of regular season games. 16 regular season games, 0 100-yard games. Like, that's unacceptable. So I understand the wide receivers needed to be better. Dak had his worst game as a pro, and it's not even close. Dak was really bad. And I get, CC, that 9-7 isn't a huge halftime lead. But you know what a huge halftime discrepancy is? 30-0. And that's what happened in the second half for the Cowboys. And even you couldn't even take advantage of the little things, such as Philly doesn't have a field goal kicker. So they're going for it on 4th downs. Like, you know that. Once you see their linebacker kicking off, you know, okay, this team's not going to be able to kick field goals, which means we can play a slightly different style of defense.
It doesn't matter that much when the team is that much better than you.
Man, they looked a lot better than them.
It also lets you know how you can play a game without a kicker.
Yeah, clearly.
Okay?
So the other thing is, and with regards to what you were talking about with Dak, he said afterwards, I think the biggest problem for us is we didn't have a balanced run game and pass game. And I know there were a lot of issues other than that, but Dak Prescott found himself running for his life most of the game. And I know he was missing his left tackle, and I know he didn't have Zeke in the lineup. But for a guy who generally prides himself on being poised and calm and has that maturity that we don't expect from second-year players, he just looked so out of sorts yesterday.
I was the guy who said last year Dak should have been the league MVP. I've been a huge proponent of Dak Prescott. I made the point last week, and I will make it again. All of these gaudy Dak Prescott numbers, CC. He's the highest quarterback rating through 25 games. All these first through 25 games, all these records he has, they have all been predicated on one thing, that he doesn't turn the ball over. That has been his touchdown interception ratio. It's not because he makes these huge plays.
Yeah.
It's because he does not turn the ball over.
But if you put enough pressure on the quarterback, if his weapons aren't making plays, and we said Dak has to play a little more reckless. He's got to throw the ball in the coverage. He's got to take chances for them to be able to win, all right? In the NFL, if you hit the quarterback, all right, the great become good, the good become average, the average become pathetic.
And the pathetic become Nate Peterman. Sorry, go ahead.
Well,
I wonder what the theme is going to be throughout this show today.
yeah, you kind of killed my thing. But
Oh, I apologize. I apologize.
Welcome back to First Things First. We're now joined by two-time Super Bowl champ, David Deal. David, how are you, man?
I'm
nice
unbelievable.
To see you.
It's always great to come on here weekly with you guys.
Yes.
nice suit.
You
Thank
can
you.
always tell what team either on their mind or they called the day before or they dealt with because you are all like red, white, and giant blue.
I had this laid out like my Sunday best last night, considering when you leave at 6 o'clock in the morning to get here. So, I did. I went with the red, white, and blue today.
There you go.
You look good.
And the Giants won, so there you go.
Yeah.
So there's a first for everything. But let's go somewhere else to start. The Patriots are still the Patriots. Tom Brady is still Tom Brady, even at 140 years old. And even in Mexico. He threw for 339 yards yesterday and 3 touchdowns as New England dominated the Raiders 33-8. Remember when we all left the Patriots for dead? Yeah, well, those Pats are now 8-2 after winning 6 straight games. Here's Tom Brady after this one.
We're trying to do it every week. We were trying to do it the first 4 weeks too, and just didn't play as well as we were capable, and been playing better lately. I think if you play good in all 3 phases for us, it's tough to beat.
Truer words were never said when it comes to the New England Patriots, David. Tell me how, in your opinion, this team turned things around after that 2-2 start, which, by the way, we all sat around and a lot of people left them for dead, and maybe no one at this table, but I'm just saying there were doubters out there. Tell me how they turned things around.
Well, number one, you have to get a lot of credit to Dante Scarnecchia, the offensive line coach for the New England Patriots. You
mean we're not going to make excuses like the other teams? You mean New England's got injuries too, Dave?
Think about it. They went into yesterday's game up against the Raiders. David Williams, their center's out. Ted Karras, a 6th-round pick from last year, steps in. Illinois alum. Got to give some credit to the Illini.
David Andrews.
And then at the right tackle position, what do you look at? Marcus Cannon out. L.A. Waddle in. He was a free agent in 13 to the Lions. They find a way to make it work. And when you look at Tom Brady's body of work this year, 39 completions of 20-plus yards, and a lot of it out of play action, 21 personnel. And what did we see last night? 3 tight ends, Gronk, Bennett, and Allen, all on the field to make sure that they, number one, protect Tom Brady because they know last year he only played 12 regular season games. Those hits are cumulative if you don't protect him down the stretch. Not to mention, what did we see defensively? A group completely tighten up. First 4 weeks giving up 32 points a clip a game. Now the last 5, how many? Less than 13 each. So they went from 31st to 3rd on the defensive side of the ball. Gronk's being Gronk. Brandon Cooks is the best trade that they've ever made to expand and get that deep threat that they've needed. And what do you see? You see a team in cohesion, offensively, defensively. We know Gostkowski is automatic when he needs to be, and that's a formula for why they're now 8-2.
And to me, it's very predictable. What they were going to do defensively, like eventually you knew that whatever style they were going to play. Sometimes they play a 43. Sometimes they play Belichick's traditional 34. A lot of that's based on the personnel. They don't have great team speed on their defense. So where do you see them? They stopped playing so much man-to-man. David Harris, a former Jet, and who no one else wanted. New England took him because he plays in the division. He helped solidify and slow down that defense because Dante Hightower, their signal caller, is out. So he stabilized the middle part. On the back end, Stephon Gilmore, he's coming from Buffalo. He plays a lot of man-to-man. I think he's a good man-to-man cover. He gets to New England, he's not really good at man-to-man. So let's start playing a lot of zone. Malcolm Butler playing a lot better in the last couple games than he was playing earlier in the season where Belichick had benched him. So to me, I've seen this movie. I've read this book several times before. So Jenna's trying to make fun of people who were prognosticators.
Yeah,
she don't want to say
she don't want to say names and everything, but Jenna, myself, and Steph have all had confidence that New England would right the ship. We weren't consumed by oh, Tom Brady's 40, because we knew they would protect him.
Yep.
That was, besides changing the defense, that's been the number one thing that New England has tried to do this year is how are we going to protect the quarterback, and we will do that. 5-man protection or 8-man protection. We have both of those scenarios figured out.
And without changing too much of the personnel, that's where the thing you always talk about, which is coaching. Like, this team took the team they had without adding too much and losing players to injury like every team did, and they coached their way to where they are right now.
Bill Belichick and his coaching staff is the only coaching staff in the league, in my estimation, that could have taken the defense with the same personnel it had over the first 4 weeks of the year, lose one of their best players, and somehow turn it into a capable defense. Despite how bad they were the first month of the season, that's now a top 15 scoring defense. Now, they're still dead last in yards given up, mostly because of the giant hole they dug themselves early on, but they are finding ways, even if they are allowing a lot of plays between the 20s.
Yards in the NFL are overrated.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's how many points do you give up? All right?
Yeah.
That's the most important stat beside turnovers, is how many points do you give up? Because every defense is going to give up yards. But the great defense is when you get in the red zone, if you get there 4 times on them, they want to make you kick at least 2 field goals. So that right there, you're still only at 20 points if they get there 4 times. So this is a recipe that has been tried and true and been proven out, and they always improve at the end of the season.
Bend but don't break him. What do you always hear out of New England? You never hear him talk about potential. You never hear him talk about this player's weaknesses. What do? They talk about what does this player do well, and that's all we need him to do in this system. That's it.
That's the most important point. That's the point I was getting to, is that what makes Belichick and his staff, in my estimation, so special is they are not stubborn. They are not saying, listen, Stephon Gilmore, we paid you all this money so we can play man-to-man. Our plan is to play man-to-man, so damn it, we're going to be playing man-to-man. They are not stubborn to the point to where they will go into a game and say, you know what, against the Raiders, they're crummy downfield pass defense, one of the worst pass defenses in the league. We're just going to take deep shots. We should be better than them. Every game, they're pliable. Every week, they go in and they, right?
You're learning. You stole my stuff.
Oh, I didn't mean to steal it, but, like, it's every week you see it. No, it's like they're a different team each week, depending on who they're playing, depending on what their injuries are, depending on what the other team's weaknesses are. They come into it and they say, okay, we are not going to try to prove any points. We're not going to try to prove that, oh, we can be a big bully if it's not a game to be a big bully. And on top of it, you have Tom Brady, who's thrown 50 touchdowns and 4 picks in his last 2 seasons. So when you have a quarterback playing at that level and that brain on your coaching staff, you can make up for mediocre talent on defense.
And look at how they won in Denver. You can't stop our tight ends. You can't stop our crossing routes.
Nope.
Your linebackers and safeties don't match up with us. And until you stop us, we're going to continue to drive it down your throat.
The best matchups to throw the football are running backs against linebackers and tight ends against linebackers or safeties. And that is where they predominantly throw the ball and have for the last 5 years.
And all those things you mentioned, that's why Eric Mangini gets so upset when we look ahead in this schedule. This team is so like blazing focused on exactly what's in front of them, on who their opponent is, where they're playing, what the conditions are, and they look at nothing else. They do it with blinders on, and that's part of what the coaching is and why they're so successful.
Jenna, you mentioned what the conditions are. Cece, you brought up a great point before the show. What city in the NFL has the lowest elevation?
Oakland.
Oakland. They are actually below sea level. Oakland stayed in Oakland preparing for this football
Where'd the
game.
Patriots go to practice?
Patriots stayed in Colorado Springs.
I told y'all that was a huge difference.
It
It was clearly a huge difference.
The Olympic
you saw
team
how
trains
gassed
there.
they were.
Bingo.
I mean, it's just these little things, the winning right before the half, getting those extra points, stealing possessions, not turning the ball over. It's these little things the Pats do great.
I told you that before the season.
I'm still waiting for Brady to look like a 40-year-old.
Welcome back to First Things First. We're joined by Super Bowl champion Cris Canty, the other CC, or maybe the
What up,
CC,
CC?
however you want to do it.
How are you?
What's going on, Cris? How's it going?
Got a little Viking purple on today.
I like
Trying
it.
to represent for
I
them.
like
Big
it.
win over the Los
Wait, that
Angeles
defense
Rams
was playing. You
yesterday.
like that
Big win.
defense?
They're rolling, man. My guy Linville Joseph was angry in the middle of that defense. Everson Griffin getting after the quarterback. They look really, really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
Well, there's another team that's been looking really, really good. The New Orleans Saints. Huge comeback win by them yesterday, down 15 with less than 6 minutes to go. Against the Washington Redskins, Drew Brees leading New Orleans to consecutive touchdown drives to tie the game in regulation. Then in OT, Mark Ingram ripped off 2 runs for 51 yards, and Will Lutz sealed the deal with a short field goal. Here's Drew Brees on the comeback win.
These are wins that you can just build on, man, and you develop confidence, and you understand that, man, the games only get tougher. They only get magnified with their importance, and you just realize that we can win. We can win anywhere, anytime, no matter what the circumstance.
All right, Cris, did the Saints come back, basically cement their Super Bowl hopes?
I think the Saints are contenders, cement their Super Bowl hopes.
Don't forget about that purple now.
That's a little bit hasty.
Bowl.
I still think that the Philadelphia Eagles are the class of the NFC, but the Saints are going to be contenders. The last time they ripped off 8 straight in a row at any point in the season, that was 2009 when they went to the Super Bowl. I think that this team, the way they're winning football games, it's not just Drew Brees now.
Right.
It's that defense and it's that running game. Now, the defense wasn't great yesterday. They gave up a lot of yards to Kirk Cousins, 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, but they made plays when they needed to. They stopped Samaje Perine on that 3rd and 1 at the end of the game
that was a
where they
huge
didn't
stop.
have any more timeouts and they could have ran the clock out on the other side of the 2-minute warning. They got the sack in overtime by Cam Jordan, got the ball back, and the rest was history.
The 3rd and 1 play just quickly.
Yep.
I mean, that was the game. If the Saints weren't guaranteed to win that game by getting that stop, but they were guaranteed to lose it if they didn't get that stop. So everyone's going to be focused on Brees, understandably. The defense made a play that gave Brees the opening to bring him back at the very end.
No, you're right, but you got to give Drew Brees his props, though, man.
Yeah.
Those 2 touchdown drives at the end of that game, after being down 15 points, less than 6 minutes to go, 8 plays, 75 yards, 4 plays, 87 yards, 11 for 11, 164 yards with the 2 touchdowns. That's balling, and that's what you expect from an elite quarterback. But the fact that the Saints team didn't flinch, being down 15 in the 4th quarter, they were able to play complementary football, offense, defense, special teams, make the plays, get it to overtime, and then find a way to win. That's impressive.
Yeah. Go ahead.
When I asked you the question right off the bat, you hesitated a bit, and I wonder, is it because they had to pull out all the stops to beat a team like the Washington Redskins? If you had seen a more dominant win yesterday, a more complete win on both sides of the ball, would your answer be different?
Well, a win is a win in the National Football League, and the Washington Redskins have been a tough out, so I'm not going to dismiss that.
Sure.
But the fact is that the New Orleans Saints team, defensively, aren't forcing the amount of turnovers that you would expect from a Super Bowl contender. And quite frankly, I like the depth of the defensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles more so than the New Orleans Saints. So that's why I would give them the nod in terms of favorites in the NFC. But again, the New Orleans Saints, they are contenders. There's somebody that you're going to have to deal with. I think that that's the team that's going to win the NFC South. They're going to win that division. I know Carolina's clipping at their heels, but I think they're going to win that division. And I like the 2-headed monster, Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara, not only as rushers, but receivers out of the backfield. You saw that at the end of that game yesterday with Kamara being able to get that touchdown at the end of the game and then the conversion to be able to push it into overtime.
One thing that when you start talking about Super Bowl teams, and it's a little early, but there's a few things that you need. I'd like to have a top 10 defense. I'd like to have a top 10, top 5 be able to run the football. Because if I have those two combinations, I can shorten the game. Now I'm going to throw this to the mix. I have a coach that's won a Super Bowl in Sean Payton. I have a quarterback that punch for punch, pass for pass, I don't care who they play, NFC, AFC, that he can duel with that guy no matter what the circumstances are. And that's what they have in Drew Brees. Now, most of the other teams that we're looking at, they don't have that. They don't have that dependability. Now, this is a Saints team that has not been laying their life on Drew Brees and his arm. They have won different ways this year. Now, back to Canty's point. Drew Brees had a perfect passing rating in the 4th quarter. After being a dominant defense and a dominant running team all season, they have a Hall of Fame quarterback that when all that is sputtering, I can pull out the win. That's why this win was really special. All these games in the NFL, they have their own story. But the confidence that you develop after making a huge comeback like that because even having a good season, they could have lost this game and said, you know something, we still got plenty of, we've had a great season so far. You're going to have a bad game. They had a bad game and still won the game. That's what the good teams are able to do, and that separates them from other teams coming down the stretch when you have someone like Drew Brees when everything else is broke down, that he can save the day. The one thing I want to watch for with New Orleans, they had a couple blown coverages yesterday that looked like the 2016 Saints and the 2015 Saints. And Marshawn Lattimore, the rookie from Ohio State, he went out early with an injury. Their pass coverage was totally different when he left the game.
Here's why I'm such a buyer on the Saints. I look around the other really good teams in the NFC, particularly the Vikings, particularly when Case is the quarterback. The Carolina Panthers, a team I'm high on, and I say, okay, I know the ways the Vikings can win, the way they won yesterday. Keep it close, tie game, choke you out on defense, similar with the Panthers. But if you're down 2 scores, are you screwed? I feel like Minnesota right now, the way their offense runs, if you're down 10, 14 points, I don't really see a path to victory. Carolina, I certainly right now, unless Cam starts playing.
I can argue that Minnesota's wide receivers are better than New Orleans. Now, you might have a lot more trust in the quarterback.
Well, it's totally about the quarterback. I agree with you.
Because those wide receivers
are dynamic.
No, they made Sam Bradford look good for a year and a little bit. Yeah. They're making Case look good.
Yeah. Totally fair. But there is no argument that needs to be made. Everyone knows that the Saints, down 2 scores, they're fine. Like, nobody's in great shape down 2 scores. But if you trust that Drew Brees, similar with the Patriots with Brady, down 2 scores, you can find a way to make it work.
And
Rodgers when he's still around. And so the fact that the Saints, over the last now 8 weeks, they have a top 3 running game, a top 3 defense, to go along with the fact when the running game isn't great or the defense really isn't great, you can still rely on Drew Brees to have, as you mentioned, Cris, a perfect fourth quarter, a 158.3 out of 158.3 rating in the fourth quarter. Man, it's hard to find a lot of teams that you like more than the New Orleans Saints. And I know we could parse and say, well, New England for this reason, Philly for this reason, but they were on the very short list of the best teams in the NFL.
Another feather in the cap for the Saints being contenders in the NFC. If you look around the teams in the NFC that are competing division leaders, all of them have really good offensive lines. The Saints probably have the best one of the bunch. Terron Armstead, Andrews Pete, Ryan Ramczyk, Max Unger. Probably the best offensive line in the NFC.
Another little factoid. Don't forget the first game of the season. People forget. New Orleans opened the season in Minnesota. Lost that. Minnesota owns the tiebreaker. So if we get to where they're going to play, all right, they'd have to go to Minnesota compared to going to the Superdome.
Huge difference.
Nathan Peterman. Turns out he's not very good. The 5th-round draft pick threw 5 interceptions on 14 passes. That's 5 on 14 passes. To put that in perspective, Tyrod Taylor, who he replaced, threw 5 interceptions in his previous 14 games. Peterman only lasted a half, and the Bills got blown out by 30 points. Buffalo coach Sean McDermott was asked about the quarterback changes after the game.
I don't regret my decision. I regret the result. We didn't get the result we were looking for. So I don't regret the decision at all.
Are you going back out there next week?
Yeah, I'm going to evaluate. I'm going to take my time and evaluate it.
I mean, how egregious was this decision to start Peterman over Tyrod Taylor? Forget based on the results, but based on the results.
Well, Jenna, that's why we don't cheer for the backup quarterbacks, all right? Everyone wants their backup in the game. Let's just put him on in the game. Oh, this guy's a YouTube sensation. He can throw off a damn building. He can throw into a net. But when they put a rush in front of him, whoa, those YouTube videos seem to be a lot easier to make than playing in the NFL.
How did the team not see this? How did his coaches not see that he just is not a great quarterback? Or
Jenna,
maybe...
sometimes there's a little political stuff involved in football.
Okay.
This was not a football decision. It couldn't have been. There's no way they saw this kid in practice and thought that at 5-4, this is the guy going to be the difference in us making a push to get into the playoffs. So it's either political or it's about the money, all right? Someone for the Buffalo Bills does not want Tyrod Taylor playing quarterback for them. The coach made the decision. Now, this is like a family driving along, and you see the arm rail come down for the railroad tracks. And you decide that I'm going to go ahead and take my car through there.
Gun it.
Now you get hit by a train, and then you survive, but you get on the other side and be like, do you regret your decision? No, absolutely not. I was in a hurry getting there. Now my car is totaled, all right? So this idiot saying, oh, no, I don't regret my decision. I mean, how simple is that? Of course I regret my decision. Because I look like an incompetent coach putting a guy who was not qualified. All right, he looked like he was on the 405 in the express lane, and he should have been on a bicycle on the side of the road.
Nick, for people that don't understand or haven't really followed it, we know what happened. We know it didn't go well. But maybe talk us through a little bit of
context of how bad?
Politics of it, or what's happening, or why this decision.
Well, let me give a little context on how bad
we can only guess on the politics.
Sure,
but that's the only reason why someone, a fifth-rounder, with Tyrod has had the type of success that he's had, with the lack of weapons that he has in Buffalo, for them to insert when they're in the playoff run. So it's just our guess.
Yeah, of course.
CC, what position did Tom Tupa play?
He played punter and played quarterback. We came to Ohio State as a quarterback and a punter.
Okay, I didn't know he was an Ohio State guy. That you might not like this as much then, but he's known as a punter. Tom Tupa became a punter after he played a game at quarterback and threw 6 picks in his first game. He's like, oh, this quarterback thing ain't for me. Going to go be a punter in the pros.
Full-on switch position.
Switch position shortly thereafter.
Right. Tom was, I got to defend Tom.
I didn't know he was an Ohio State guy.
Because you don't have all your intel on this one, okay? Tom was an All-American punter at Ohio State. He played a little bit of quarterback after I left.
Okay.
I was supposed to be the wide receiver throwing to him his senior year.
I'm talking in the pros. The reason why am I bringing up Tom Tupa? Because he's the only player in NFL history to throw more picks in his first career start than Nathan Peterman. And Tom Tupa's angry that they took Peterman out because Peterman was going to take that record from him and keep it forever. He threw 5 picks in the first half. Cece, you tweeted, Tyrod, I think you were being a little tongue-in-cheek, but that Tyrod, when they ask him to go back in, should say, nah, man. Like,
no, I wasn't being tongue-in-cheek. No, I was seriously like, no, let someone else. Y'all started this fire. Send someone else to put it out.
The Bills and people acting like, well, the Bills, they were just going to be mediocre at best with Tyrod. That's the worst place to be. Man, miss me with that. The Bills have not played in a playoff game since the Music City Miracle. It is the longest drought in NFL, currently
in all sports.
In all sports, okay.
In all the major league sports, they have the longest drought as far as missing the playoff. They're 5-4, and they decided to bench the quarterback on a Wednesday.
It's shameful. And people might say, oh, well, it's part of the Bills' long-term plan. I want to make this clear. The Bills do not have a long-term plan.
I was just going to say, what is the long-term plan?
Well,
that's part of it.
You would think, okay, so they trade Sammy Watkins. They get rid of Robert Woods. They trade away Marcel Darius. Those are moves in order to look to the future. But they let Stephon Gilmore go. They would have gotten a third-round compensatory pick for him if they would have just cut 3 back-end-of-the-roster players last week. They didn't do that. So now they won't get that draft pick. They traded away a draft pick to bring in Kelvin Benjamin. So they're simultaneously making win-now moves while making look-to-the-future moves while benching their quarterback. And this is the concern for Buffalo, which because the AFC, the bottom half of the AFC, is such a dumpster fire, they're still positioned to make the playoffs. Yeah. How does Sean McDermott have any credibility in that locker room? How?
Well, this is the thing. He's got a long-term contract, all right? So don't get into, you can't get into who the owner hires, all right? Now, you got a job to do. When you get your assignment, you go out and do your job, absent of what he's saying, because I got responsibility. I got a family to take care of. So sometimes, do the players respect the coach? It's not that necessary because I got to do my job anyway, whoever they hire as the coach.
So the reason I bring it up is a week ago today, he went on, well, not just television, but to the media and to his players and said, I know who Nate Peterman is. I know who Tyrod Taylor is. My quarterback's Tyrod Taylor. 48 hours later, he made the change, and it went, I thought it would go poorly. I didn't think it'd go 5 picks and 14 passes poorly.
So you guys, you have the experience here. What happens now next week? What do? I mean, does he save face and say, I went with Nate Peterson, he needs another shot? What do you think he's going to do? Or does he go back to Tyrod Taylor now?
I'm going to tell y'all, I hope they put him back in there. I hope he plays again.
Yeah.
I really do. Because I know the coach. I know this is a bad decision. But you think you're smart enough?
You hope they play Peterman again?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'd love to see a good car crash on a Sunday. Because this is going to get worse. Like, he's not ready to play in the NFL. He's not the quarterback of your future. Like, bad decisions, all right? These are the things that have helped New England dominate for 15 years. What's going on in Buffalo? What the Jets do? What the Dolphins do? People wonder why they win 10, 12 games every year. Look who's in their division. Well, look at the decisions that they make.
And by the way, Tyrod came into that game with the Chargers teeing off, knowing that Buffalo was going to have to pass because they were down by 100 points, and all Tyrod did was go out and have an efficient game. 15 of 25, a 92 rating, a touchdown through the air, another touchdown on the ground. Tyrod was the bastion of professionalism throughout the week and on Sunday. He deserves better than what he's gotten in Buffalo. And at this point, you know what? I'm glad the Bills are mismanaging this. There are teams out there that need quarterbacks that can win. Denver needs quarterback. Jacksonville needs quarterbacks. I'm just talking about teams that could be good with a quarterback. I hope he finds a spot there next season because Tyrod Taylor, while he's not a great quarterback, I never said he was a great quarterback. He is one of the 16 best in the league. So he's in the top half, maybe the bottom half of the top half. He deserves better than to be benched for a guy who threw 5 picks in 14 attempts.
If it is Nate Peterman, he's got his hands full next week. Or maybe he doesn't with the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City.
He'd have his hands full with Alabama. Like, he's not an NFL quarterback. He's not a high-level Division I quarterback. He's just, and I feel badly. Nate Peterman
don't feel bad.
Asked to be
It's pro football.
Like
this is not college, Nick. We're not taking care of the kids. The kid's not on a scholarship. The guy's being paid a lot of money. It's the coach that made the bad decision to put the trick shot artist in there to realize that, hey, they hit in these videos compared to the other ones I'm used to making.
The Vikings improved to 8-2 with a win against the Rams. Los Angeles came into this one averaging an NFL best 33 points per game, but Minnesota's defense came up big, leading the Vikes to a 24-7 win. CeCe, how impressed were you by the Vikings and their defense?
The Vikings defense has played like this for several years, all right? They have had injuries, not only this season, not only last season, but that's kind of been their story the last several years. So they've been a quality defense. Now they're starting to get some support. They got great special teams, and they're starting to get some support from their offense, from a ground control. They have 4 new starters on the offensive line at 5 new positions. So they've been able to protect their quarterback. They can run the ball and pass the ball. Thielen and Stephon Diggs, probably the second best wide receiver tandem this season outside of Pittsburgh. Yeah, they're the second best. So you're getting that type of productivity. It just helps support this defense that also plays inside, plays on a surface. They're undersized, and they're very, very fast. And they have Pro Bowl players at every level, all right? Emerson Griffin playing at the defensive end. Their linebackers, Barr and the one with his teammate from
UCLA, Kendricks?
Yeah, Kendricks. And then you have 2 Pro Bowl, 1 safety and 1 corner in Rhodes. So they have all-pro players at all levels that people don't know about. But this is the Vikings defense that's been good for several years.
And listen, they're pro. You said at the very end, it was funny. Our producers before the show, because they were picking out which Viking defender is going to be right behind me, and they were going through the names, and they're trying to find a guy that like the average football fan knows. And it's like a bunch of anonymous, awesome players. Like, people don't know that Everson Griffin, how great he's been over the beginning of his career and how high he ranks as far as sacks in his first however many career games. People don't know that they might have 2 all-pros in the secondary, and Xavier Rhodes and Harrison Smith. Like, the Anthony Barr. They've got great players at every level, and they are doing this on defense, Chris, without forcing a bunch of turnovers. No. They're 20th in the NFL in turnovers forced. They are doing it by just being better than you as far as stopping the run and stopping the pass.
And it also speaks to the Vikings what the front office has done. So people who follow the draft and everything, they all know these are high draft picks. Everyone but Everson Griffin, for the most part, those are first-round picks that they spent on players that are paying huge dividends for that defense.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern on FS1. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.